Welcome to this episode of Why Pals Tales from the Super Yacht Laundry. Now, I have we've had Kat on as a guest before, and I really wanted her to come back on to actually talk more in depth about what she actually does, because we've heard her story about how she ended up on yachts and then coming off, but I think it would be really, really good for listeners to understand what you're doing now properly and how it benefits and what you're observing in the industry. So thank you for coming on again.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to see you again.
Yes, well, it's like I said at the end of the last interview that we did, what you're doing. I see there is a group of people actually that are doing really amazing brand new things. And, we really are at the forefront of realizing that a lot of crew wellness, as they like to call crew wellness, I think that's a bit of a naff term, but like crew wellness
Yeah,
is
well,
all
I think,
linked together with performance, if
yes.
on board.
But I think the term wellness, I think a lot of people, what I'm trying to do is get into true wellness. And a lot of people have they're missing the mark in what true wellness is, because a lot of it is so tied up in diet culture and kind of wankery information, like non-scientific information. And so I'm trying to change the conversation from diet culture and biohacking and all that kind of stuff into actual longevity and performance. And because
Yeah.
it's such a high demanding industry, so we need to tackle the issues that crew are facing from upstream, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much being done with the downstream, which is kind of like all the mental health first aid and all that kind of stuff is amazing, but that's like that's crisis mode.
Yeah.
What's happening at the top? So
Yeah. So, I mean, I've just come back from Mets and been to the forum, and obviously there's a lot of talk now because obviously crew wellness, whether that's mental health, physical health or whatever, goes in hand with crew retention, and that was a big topic that we covered, that was covered at the forum. So it's all linked together. But let's before we go into what's going on in the industry right now. And we'll just do a little bit of a refresh. So obviously, Kat was a stewardess on board, and then you decided to go back to uni to do nutrition. But doing nutrition for crew wasn't your first thought, was it?
no, so the yacht nutritionist was not my plan. It kind of just happened, which is so great and it's so fun and I love what I'm doing. There's so much purpose in it. But during my university studies, I was involved in a huge research project that took us years. And I was working with PhDs, and it was so exciting and it was groundbreaking. All this information that we were getting from it spanned 6 different economical powerhouse countries. So it was like UK, Australia, USA, Canada, New Zealand. That's five, 5 countries. And it was a long time ago now, but it was just so exciting. And I loved the research. I loved the data that we were seeing because we could literally graph it on charts of what kind of food was being served to children at restaurants and how the governmental policies did have an impact on that. Because sometimes, you think, oh, these government policies of you can't have X amount of sodium in such a food for children or adults. Even you don't really see the impact of that, but we were able to see the impact of it. And actually Australia came out as the worst, which you wouldn't think.
Did
But
you, were you shocked when you were obviously going into these research projects and you started learning? Were you actually shocked at the state of nutrition of people on the
yes,
planet? Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like you
it
think,
still
oh,
still
I'm
is.
not sure I'm not that bad, but
Yeah,
it is quite bad.
it is, and
Um,
it still is shocking to when you go to a public health facility like a hospital or somewhere like that, and you see the food that's being served. It is pretty shocking. But I wanted to go into research more so to do with the gut microbiome, and that's where my real passion was. I just loved research. I loved being at the forefront of technology as well and what's being developed for the human gut microbiome and everything. And it was really fascinating. But I graduated uni, and during my years at uni, as I chatted about in our last podcast, I was temping on boats. And a lot of the girls, once I graduated, said, "Hey, I love your philosophy. I love your ethos about food. I truly embody what I believe and what I teach my clients." And I said, "Hey, can I work with you?" And then I found myself having 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 clients that were all yacht stews. And so I said to Val, I was like, "Hey, should I just start an Instagram page called The Yacht Nutritionist?" And he was like, "Yeah, go for it. Why not?" And then I did. And so we're here.
It's one of those, I'm a firm believer of kind of going with the flow. It wasn't probably on your radar, but it makes perfect sense that women on board would be struggling. There are
Mm,
so many different factors. So you're nutritionists, you've got obviously ex-crew members, well, current crew members reaching out to you going, "I see what you're doing. It's quite interesting."
mm.
Do you think that was is that a cry for help, or is that natural interest, or it was the struggle that they felt like they were going through, like maybe
Yeah, well,
Kat would
I
know
I
something,
know
or
I know that when my clients work with me, they've basically tried everything else, and they're coming from the place of diet culture. They're not happy with their bodies. They do want to have, some weight loss and stuff like that, but they're feeling the stigma of the body image and the pressures of body image on board. They're finding themselves eating food that they don't really want to be eating. So the crew mess, unfortunately, is full of ultra processed foods, which, as we know, does not contribute to a healthy gut microbiome whatsoever. And they want support and they want guidance. And I've, created something that they really align with and resonate with. They resonate with, and I basically created something that gives them freedom from all that, from food and your body occupying so much headspace. And I think I just really embody just such a fresh and modern approach to the whole weight loss conversation, to the whole, well-being conversation that is really appealing because I am doing something that's fresh, that's different, that is also, I have proof of the pudding. My clients are having incredible transformations, physical transformations, but it's also coming first from a mental transformation and how they think about food, how they think about their bodies and themselves. And yeah, it's really powerful.
it's obviously the I don't know. I've probably been on loads of diets. So what did I do? I did a diet whilst I was on board.
The master cleanse, that's a big one.
It was
That
just,
was,
it was basically shakes, really. There was like a
yeah.
shake and meal substitutes. So obviously
Yeah.
you
I think
just have
Herbalife,
one meal
Herbalife is
today, one meal
still,
a day.
yeah, Herbalife is still around, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's just, I know after a yard period, as you do, put on a bit of weight. And we were in the yard in Palma, and the crew like the workers' canteen and stuff, everything was deep fried. Oh my God. It was,
Yeah.
everything on the
Yeah.
menu was deep fried. There wasn't, there was barely any salad on there. So obviously you have a few
Yeah, I mean
months of
that's what we're
that.
talking about. That's what I mean with there is such a problem with nutrition globally, and that's my ethos is I basically have no restrictions. I eat everything, but one thing I generally won't eat is fried food. Mostly because I just don't like it. It's dripping in oil. It doesn't make me feel good. I'm sluggish afterwards. It's horrible. And secondly,
Uh,
it's terrible for you.
Yeah, it's lots of like I was quite so like the cheap food in Spain, again, it's a bit like the cheap food in the UK. It's generally deep fried. There's not a green thing anywhere near it. Um, which shocks me in a way because obviously using like great tapas and all of these things. And yeah, you
Yeah.
can get it, but it generally costs to get it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
obviously
exactly. But that's
we're talk we're talking about on board. So obviously you've been working with ladies on board for a while now. Um, would you say we've got it's quite a rife place for like a distorted body image?
Oh, for sure.
Because
Yeah, I think that's that's kind of the major issue that I'm battling with is body image issues because of obviously the pressures of what you look like and the skirt size. But for example, you'll have one girl on the team maybe talking about her diet or talking about how much weight she's lost recently because she hasn't been fueling herself properly on charter, and she's using charter as a means to kind of cut because she's so busy. And she's like, oh, great, like I can skip lunch because I'm so busy. First of all, you can't skip lunch. You need the fuel to be able to give yourself, the right nutrients to power through that 16-hour day feeling good, because it's not just about looking good. You have to feel good while you're doing it, or else you're just living a fake life. No one wants to do that. You're just faking it, right? But you'll have this one girl, and she's lost a lot of weight on that couple charters that she's been doing, maybe some back-to-back charters, and she's using it as a way to restrict. And she's like, oh my God, look at me. Like, I've lost so much weight. Oh my God, I've got down a skirt size. And this starts to have an effect on the other girls on the team. And they're like, oh, like maybe I should start cutting food too, and then we'll have someone try to cut food. There's a lot of people who do struggle with the binge and restrict cycle. So once you start restricting, it's going to backfire and you're going to start binging. And unfortunately, on yachts, you have all of those highly palatable foods, high sugar, high fat, high salt, those ultra processed foods available at your fingertips. So it's the perfect place for binge because it's also going to be replaced. Like no one's going to really notice that 10 Snickers bars have gone missing. I mean, they'll just like, oh, we'll just buy some more, because it's an unlimited budget.
it is that, you do sometimes just don't have time. I remember the worst was being a chief stew for me. Like you know, I literally only ate when I felt like I was,
Mm,
my
about to
hunger
pass
levels were
out.
like high. Like
Mm,
I need to eat something. And then depending on what time of day that actually hit me would be what I could actually access.
yeah.
Mid-charter, the chances of me sitting down and trying to eat a meal without trying to do something else at the other was pretty bad. So obviously on board, you don't have any control about what you're going to have access to. Okay. Unless you're the chief stew, which you get to go shopping and provision, you don't have any. I suppose you could get food and put it in your cabin, but it's probably not recommended. So that's kind of
No,
maybe you could
that's
do
usually not
snacks and stuff
allowed.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you kind of restricted um on what you can do. So let's start. So like let's start with like obviously what in an ideal world, what you're on charter. Let's say you are supposed to have 3 meals a day. What would the most optimum kind of setup be for a crew
Okay.
member?
So let's say you're on early housekeeping and you have to get up. It's a 5 a.m. start. Nobody wants to eat that early. Therefore, the early team should be given about 10 to 15 minutes, say around 7:30, 8 o'clock, to have a bit of a breakfast, right? And then, so they've had something to eat, and then that holds them until 12. So ideally, you do want to be consuming something to keep your blood sugar levels stable every 4 hours. It's not impossible to do on charter because you're kind of doing it anyway because the girls are always snacking in the pantries. They're popping chocolates into their mouth in the housekeeping cupboard. It's happening, right? They are eating. So um, that you have to allow the crew to have it's 10 minutes. That's all you need to kind of, you are scoffing and you are eating quickly. That's going to be happening. You're not going to be having a half an hour lunch break on charter, that's for sure. But you can eat mindfully, even though you're under pressure and you're under stress, to only have, 10 minutes to eat something. But basically, for the early girls, they have to have an allotted time for breakfast. They'll have lunch around 12, probably another little snack, even if it's you just sneaking to your bathroom to have a protein bar and maybe a few little fruits in your hand or something. Like maybe you need to sneak something around 3 or 4 o'clock to have a quick little snack. But often I say, so crew dinner is at 5. This is unrealistic for majority of people. And I actually preferred to be on service, like on late service, because I hated having dinner at 5 p.m. because it just completely threw me off because I found I was just randomly eating then all through the night because I was never hungry at 5 p.m. Like that was such a weird time for me physiologically to eat. But you do have to get yourself into the rhythm of the boat. And that's what I say with my clients is that you do have to learn how to get into the rhythm of the boat because the boat's not going to change for you, right?
It's
So we
really
have
like
to,
when I was early, so when I was like housekeeping and stuff like that, and obviously getting up at that time, I always
mm,
tried, I forced myself to, like, I did, even if I didn't feel like breakfast, I'd always force myself. Like, I generally, my go-to was like oats, because otherwise I'd literally get to 8 o'clock and I would be starving, like not just a
yeah,
little bit hungry, but like ravenous. Because obviously in the morning you do all of the guest areas, then the guests start getting up and you're straight into doing cabins. If I didn't have anything in my stomach, like I would be beyond ravenous. Like it would be a distraction because I'd be so hungry and probably thirsty as well. Because obviously we're not even talking about fluids.
yeah. No,
Um,
for sure. I mean, ideally, that's the best case scenario because your food will keep you stable. And we want to prevent you from being ravenous. You don't want to get to the point where you're so hungry because then anything goes. You're not able to make the best choices for yourself that align with your values, whether that's losing weight, ideally not, because, but it's okay if someone values losing weight. But I mean, just for your health and for your well-being and for your energy, that's the kind of stuff to support you working such long hours. That's the stuff that I'm interested in is long-term longevity and well-being.
what's the damage you do to your body if you've done like, 3 week charter working, generally 16-hour days? And if you're not, by the end of that, if you're not eating properly, you're snacking on Snickers bars, you're kind of haphazard, probably a lot of carb loading, what kind of damage do you do to your body by the time you're finished?
It's a hormonal train wreck. So basically, we're going to be talking elevated cortisol, disrupted gut microbiome, so the wrong type of gut bacteria that are starting to take over the good gut bacteria. Your hormones, so your stress hormones, you're probably going to be seeing like acne, puffiness, water retention. You're not going to be comfortable. And this is what happens is that the girls will tend to eat this way on charter. I mean, they'll eat like shit. They're eating shit. They're eating the ultra processed foods. They feel like shit after charter, and they're like, right, juice cleanse. They go so far in the other direction, but they don't learn how to support themselves through charter to get through in a healthier way.
It's I'm prime, I thinking back, like it's really interesting talking to you because obviously all I do is think about like how I ate on board, and not the
Yeah.
bad habits. I mean, one owner, and they loved like macaroons. I used to just shove one in my mouth whole. They were very discreet, really. You could literally stick a
They
hole, but
melt they
then
melt so quickly.
yeah, like
Yeah.
easy, like one whole one straight in there, carry on doing what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? Terrible. But even back then, I knew it was like the sugar is so good, but that with every high there is a low.
Exactly. Yeah,
So you're gonna be all right. And then obviously coffee, which is abused.
totally.
How many cups of coffee should you have a day, would you say?
I think it's three. I think it's 3 cups of coffee. It's about, I think the maximum is 600 milligrams of caffeine. So it's actually quite a lot of caffeine. But I might be wrong. I don't quite remember, but I think it's 600 milligrams of caffeine is the maximum limit. So, what is there? There's 87 milligrams of caffeine in an espresso, 87 to 100. That's 6 espressos. That's a lot.
That's a lot. I wouldn't sleep
Yeah,
though after that.
but
So
but there are two different types of caffeine metabolizers. So there's like a type A caffeine metabolizer and type B, and this all has to do with how your liver, genetically, how someone's liver metabolizes coffee. So a type B is someone who metabolizes it quite slowly, and there's someone who metabolizes it very rapidly. I'm a type B, and I metabolize it slowly, and it gives me the jitters. Like I actually can't drink caffeine because I'm so sensitive to any kind of caffeine stimulation. I get really jittery, anxiety, like heart palpitations. I start sweating. So caffeine for those individuals is actually not recommended because it has,
Yeah,
yeah,
I did never think. Well, I don't know. I'm getting on in my days, so I'm becoming super sensitive to caffeine.
yeah.
I can't drink caffeine past lunchtime, really. Even
And
Diet
you can't
Coke.
sleep.
Like if I was,
Yeah,
it
even
really
Diet
affects
Coke.
my
I
alcohol
actually
affects
buy,
it.
I buy caffeine-free Diet Coke, the Coke Zero caffeine-free. It's great.
It is it great? I don't know. I always feel bad. Like it's one of those things you get into the habit of it, you know. It's like I don't really need a Diet Coke, but it is that
Yeah.
taste thing. It's I always go back to the one person that I asked, you know, what coffee did they want, and they wanted a decaf cappuccino, but with almond milk. I'm like, well, just drink something
Mm.
else. There's nothing
Mm.
in it that is it, you know. So if I have Diet Coke but with no caffeine, no sugar, like I might as well drink something else. But it is, you do
It
get,
tastes
it's a
exactly
habit.
the same.
But it's a habit, you know. It's the Diet
Um,
Coke thing is not really a drink because I'm thirsty or anything like. It's just a habit taste, you know. You get
it,
into
it's a
having
sweet
one.
treat, basically, and that's how I see them. I see a Diet Coke as, oh, I'll just have a nice little like refreshing sweet treat, basically. That's what it is for me.
What are the main problems that crew create for themselves because of bad choices?
So yeah, it's a tough question because there's so many compounding factors. You cannot just isolate it to one thing. It's not just black and white, but the compounding factors are all the ultra processed foods in the crew mess, the diet culture that is on board, the self-proclaimed nutritionists who think that they're doing the right things, but they're actually making the complete wrong choices for their health and for their well-being on board. And they're also kind of like really vocal about it and about what they're doing with their food and their nutrition and their body. Um, Thirdly, we have to talk about what's coming out of the galley on some vessels. It's absolutely appalling. Not all the time, but that is something I'm very passionate about. And it's just not good enough for us to be in such a luxurious industry as we are. And there's such high pressures on the crew for performance, for appearance, for their well-being. It's not good enough. And three, obviously the alcohol in the industry is a problem. But I am noticing there is a slight shift on a very, very minuscule level of crew wanting to be on vessels that don't have such a heavy drinking culture. And crew are even happy to work on dry boats because they've had such bad experiences on other vessels of just being completely out of control and wild parties, and they're suffering for weeks after these parties, and you can't say no and all this stuff, and yeah, it's all consuming. So
Yeah, I mean, it's everything on board is all consuming because you're living and breathing it. Um, so obviously, after talking to these individuals, you've got clients now that you're trying to support whilst living on board. What's the main challenges that, if you're starting to reflect on your own food, you know, how much control can they have? How much can they?
yeah, I mean, the one thing that I do is I definitely tell them, or we work together for them to create a better provisionings list and for better options in the crew mess. And for my stews, let's say even if I have a junior stew, I'm educating her more in how to read labels. And so what's a better granola to have on board? And so other crew, she can help educate as well. So it's kind of, I have one, I've worked with crew on over 50 vessels now, which is super cool. And to
Wow,
see
amazing.
how that crew mess is changing slightly, there's definitely a lot more work that needs to be done, because also then you run into the problem of the chief stew who has 12 years experience not really wanting to listen to someone who's only been on board only 1 year experience, right? It's kind of like know your place type of hierarchy in the industry that is existent.
It's also a habit, though, isn't it? If you've got a chief stew that, like you're saying, like when it comes to peak season, she's loving life because she's using that to diet at the same time. So by the time she finishes season, she's slim and trim, and
Yeah,
she's been doing that for the last 10
No,
years.
but she knows. She knows it's not sustainable and she's sick of the yo-yo. I have chief stews that have come to me after being in the industry for 12 years and living this way, and they're at rock bottom and they're so burnt out, they're so mentally, physically exhausted, they don't have the energy anymore, and they're just done. They're like, oh my God, Kat, like what is food freedom? Like, I need a piece of this food freedom because I'm so sick of living my life this way. And that's what it's like. That's why I say the people who work with me, they're done. They're done with diet culture. They're done with that conversation of, the heavy restriction on charter, and then off season, they're just, they're rebounding and they're gaining so much weight. They're sick of the yo-yo.
Yeah, it must, well, you just keep going through cycles. How much does the, obviously it's being obsessed with women and obviously knowing that I have bloody menopause on the horizon. It's possibly the most depressing thing ever. But obviously, having done and spoken to individuals like yourself, our bodies are changing. So, like, by the strike of 30, it's like, oh, everything will change when you're 30. Things actually are physically changing from,
Mm.
around 30. So, obviously, how much does that play a factor? Because,
Oh, huge.
you've
But
got.
also, I mean, you have to bring into the conversation, we're not educated on what is happening with our monthly hormonal cycles, which is so important. Before my degree, I had no idea what was happening with my hormones monthly. And it's just something that's kind of brushed off, and women are made fun of, like, oh, are you on your period or like something like that. But actually, something physiologically, hormonally is happening internally. And some people respond in very negative ways to that, and some, it's a spectrum, right? Some people are affected severely by their monthly cycles and some people not so much, but it's yeah.
What's it, obviously one of the main reasons women leave is to have children. How much can getting into like a crazy diet habit affect, could have a knock-on effect hormonally, then ultimately fertility wise? Like, is there any research into that? Like,
What was the first part of the question? Sorry, you just broke up. I think our Wi-Fi is not so strong.
talking about, so obviously nutrition affects hormones. Hormones can ultimately affect fertility, and especially with the fact that yachties gamble until the very end before they get off the boat to then start having a family, which
Hmm.
I mean, we're just about to do some episodes on fertility and the gamble of waiting until you're 30, or in
You
your
don't have as
30s
much
to have
time as
children.
you think, or what social media is making it out to seem like. It seems like, oh, we can have children until we're 40. You can't.
But
um
is there a knock-on effect from like nutrition to fertility? Well, it's all just
For sure.
general,
I mean,
isn't it, really?
it's all connected, definitely. I mean, you want to follow a low inflammation diet. I mean, that's the healthiest way for someone to live their life, to have balanced hormones and to be feeling good and have vitality, is you have to lower inflammation systemically within your body. That's, making sure you're having enough fiber, lean protein, omega 3s, heart healthy fats, plethora of your fruits and veggies, and limiting alcohol to, on occasion, no binge drinking, no binge eating. Yeah, one of my clients, I think I said this on the last episode, she was actually bulimic, and now for 12 years, she was chief stew bulimic for 12 years, and now she's pregnant. So your body, it can recover, and it will recover and bounce back as long as you know that you're doing the right things and not following, as I say, that wellness wankery information that's out there.
What are the latest wellness trends that you're horrified with?
Well, I think still fasting. So that's a really big one. And a lot of girls on board, they're not eating until about 10 o'clock. So they're starting their shift at 8. So boss off, they're starting their shift at 8. They're eating at 10. Then they're also eating lunch at noon. And so they're kind of stuck in this cycle of not listening to their bodies because they've heard holding off breakfast is really good for you and super healthy, but you're eating at 10, eating at noon, you don't, you're constantly over full, right? Like it's not a good feeling. And so it's perpetuating that cycle of losing touch with your hunger and your fullness hormones already. I think the latest kind of like wellness wankery trend. There's just so many. I mean, I think I think colonics is probably one that recently I was very shocked to hear of
Whoa.
how popular that was, especially, yeah. And this was
What do we
actually,
mean, colonics? You can't do that at work, can you?
no, this is coming from this is a male chef actually, land-based. And he asked me, he said, should I be doing this? I'm like, definitely not. He's like, oops. I'm like, what do you mean? We're messaging back and forth. I'm helping him with his nutrition. He's great. He's super cool. But he's like, oops, should I not have done it? And I'm like, well, how many times have you done it? And I think he said once or twice a week for the past 6 weeks. And he's saying he's
Jesus
struggling.
Christ.
He's saying he's struggling with bloating, constant fatigue. He's looking after himself. I mean, this is just because it was heavily promoted in from that wellness culture that isn't actually well at all. So yeah, I
Feel
just
sure, and
basically
it doesn't feel violated. Like that's a lot
so
of, action in an area that, I don't want to
so I
question his
told him,
sexuality, but like no, just, you might be doing something
well,
for a one-off,
you
but not
actually
like
get it.
twice a week.
You get addicted to it actually because it feels very kind of like you feel so light afterwards. You feel like you've really cleaned yourself out. But what you're cleaning out is your gut microbiome. And I was like, you need to be focusing on fermented foods because you've basically you've flushed out your microbiome. You've literally just like shoved a whole bunch of water in there and they've all come right out.
Lovely. Oh, it always just amazes me what trends next. Like, what is
Well, this is
next?
what I mean with the
I always
bio.
remember that one. Was it Beyonce that did that cayenne pepper and lemon and like
That's the
just that?
master cleanse. Yeah, that's the master cleanse.
Oh,
That was
that's
really popular
just
when I was working on bots with on boats with my chief stew 12 years ago. She was on the master cleanse. She was always on it, always trying it. She'd do the master cleanse for a month and then eat a whole bunch of food, then do the master cleanse again. But going back to the colonics thing, this is what I mean with biohacking. And there are some biohacking technologies or techniques or tools or strategies that are beneficial for human health. Like one of them is, biohack your sleep, like try and get as much sleep as you can, which is great. I mean, in yachting, it's kind of impossible. But this is what I mean. Whereas if you're getting your information and it's touted as being the best thing for your health, like what this guy believed with the colonics, it's absolutely not. It's false information.
I mean, sleep is a major factor. I know that especially when you're for me, chief stew, you're just wound up all the time, and it's really hard to wind down. But there's like trends now. It's like the melatonin tablets, just to try and
Yeah.
lots of calming. But they're herbal remedies, really, to just try
Yeah.
and get
Herbal
into a
is great.
deeper sleep.
Ashwagandha. Yeah. All that kind of stuff.
So having obviously worked with a number of individuals that are on board and trying to come to terms with their relationship with food, and changing it, how much of a part is the galley in this? So when I think back to my time on board, I felt quite lucky. My chefs, what they put out, nice food. I had the best homemade burger of my entire life with the best coleslaw and like the veggies, like one in particular, like what he could do with vegetables was quite amazing. Like I ended up expanding my palate because the vegetables that he was kind of cooking up were just, they were brand new to me, but they tasted incredible. So I always felt myself quite lucky. The healthiest I've probably ever eaten in my life was on board because I'm terrible at home because I have no interest in cooking whatsoever, much to my husband's dismay. So I'm just not, I can cook, but I'm just not like, I would just eat very plain, stir-fried vegetables and a piece of protein, and then I'd be quite happy to have that meal again and again. Like I'm not fussed really. I've not got a lot of interest in food that way. But I know not all boats are like that. And I have told you the story about the fact that cold McDonald's got me fired once.
I love this story. It's such a good story because there's
If
there's a
anything's
lot. Go on, go
so
ahead.
if anything's gonna get you fired, it's losing your rag because of cold McDonald's. I lost it. Like
So
I
you
lost
basically
it.
shouted because you what was tell us the story. It's a great story.
I will just revisit the story. So basically, first experience on boats, Russian owners, they just never got off. It was like second month. They were just like, no time off. Everybody's getting a bit narky. I started with a really amazing chef called Dave. He still lives in Parma. Like, I love him. He's one of the best chefs I've ever, been around. His food was incredible and still is incredible. Shout out to Dave if he ever listen. He won't listen to this,
I
but
should go
anyway.
see
Uh,
Dave. Go hang out with him
uh
in Selma. I
yeah,
said
no,
I should go
well,
see him.
we're still in touch, but he was like my first experience with an incredible chef on board, but he quit because the boat was turning into a nightmare, and we got an Italian chef, and it was just a lot of pasta and a lot of oil, and there wasn't much fresh stuff knocking around. So obviously, by the time we got to the second month, like, if he's dishing out this stuff, that's fine. But then there was just one day, like the guests got off. The chief steward and captain chef got off to provision. They were gone for 7 hours to provision. I think they just went and had to sit down. I
They
would
went
have
and had
probably done it
lunch,
as well.
had a
Yeah, no,
glass of
they went
wine.
and had
Yeah, for
lunch.
sure.
Like,
Happens all
for
the
me, it's
time.
okay. But that's fine. Don't care. But
Yeah,
literally, obviously, he came back and they just came back with bags and bags of cold McDonald's and just put it on the crew mess table. And then that was what we
yeah,
were supposed to eat. Like, I'm not a prim. Like, it's not like I wouldn't eat McDonald's, but
yeah.
the McDonald's chips are disgusting when they're cold.
When they're cold.
Like they're
Oh, and
not. It's not something
soggy.
you can reheat. Like once
No.
they're cold, they're cold. But I was tired and exhausted, and I just lost it. I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
No.
I was like, "Rah! We've all been working really hard. Where the hell have you been for all of these?" Like, it was it. That was it. And then the next
Yeah.
day, I got fired.
No, I mean, good for you. I think that's incredible that you were able to speak up and say something, but then again, we're not allowed to speak up and say anything, right? Because you're a junior, and that's the part of the whole hierarchy thing in yachting. And the chefs are amazing. They do their jobs phenomenally. They're fantastic. They are world-class chefs, but the math is just not mathing. 2 plus 2 is not equaling 4 because we have, as I said before, the pressures of body image, the pressures of high performance in the industry, the long hours. We need to fuel the crew with better food. You said that you were super lucky to work with a chef that did really care about the crew's food, and it's actually not even a question of caring because I know the chefs do care. It's more so a question of having the access to fresh food, the
Budget.
resources, the energy. There also work like I think the chefs are the hardest workers on the boat. I mean, they need more help. They're cooking for, let's say, 22 crew, and all the dishes and everything. Maybe there's two of them in the galley, but like it's just not adding up. And for one, crew food should never be deep fried, or if it is, once a month, right? There should be some kind of because I'm not saying regulation, but there should be some kind of rules because anything goes. And when you're tired, yes, it's so easy to just chuck something into the deep fryer and just put it out into the crew mess, right? I mean, I get it, but this is actually funny you mentioned McDonald's because one of my clients who I'm really working hard with her to repair her relationship with food. And she said to me yesterday, she's like, Kat, I'm at wit's end now. Like we've just moved back onto the boat. The chef's been out provisioning. There's two of them on board. Yesterday, their options for dinner was, do you want McDonald's or do you want pizza? And then she was like, oh, what can I get something else, like a little bit more nutrient dense, and she gets made fun of for asking for something else. Like, oh, it's not good enough for you. Are you too good to have McDonald's? That's not the problem. It's more so like I need better fuel, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
I
sh-
mean, that's what
and
happened in my, that's why I ended up getting fired because the whole crew turned against me. Like, oh, they're busy,
yeah,
can't you just this once? I'm like, but I'm knackered.
we're, yeah,
I'm
exactly.
like,
We've
it's
also
not
been
gonna do
working.
anything.
But then also, I mean, when you are working those 16-hour days, a lot of the time, the one thing that you look forward to is having a nice meal in the crew mess when you're on charter and you come down to the crew mess and let's say it's your options are fish and chips or pork belly. And you just look at that. And as, as a female that likes to look after themselves and cares about their wellness and their well-being and they want to feel good, I would look at that and be like, well, fucking thanks, guys, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna make myself like a tuna and rice bowl, but then I got shit for making myself a tuna and rice bowl. You know what I mean? Like, it's not adding up.
I think it is a bit of an issue because obviously, like we've said, you've got the different fatty diets, and chefs do get asked to kind of participate and kind of, I'm on a diet, and obviously we've not even touched on the vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian issue, which I know from a chef's perspective, they'll try and be as accommodating as possible, but like you said, in their insane hours, it's just another thing for them to do. Hope surely there's a way where we can work all of that out. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a way to kind of
Yeah,
help support
exactly. I mean,
chefs.
and that's what I mean. That's where they need more support. And I see it. I have chef clients working with me. I know the hours they're pulling. I mean, I've worked on boats and yeah, it's crazy. They need more help. They need more support. That's where like a nutritionist working with a chef, it is a powerhouse. When this guy I was talking about with the colonics, he's an incredible chef. He knows like he can make the most incredible food, but then now powered with me, it's just like, whoa, okay. He's like, I don't know as much about food as I thought I knew, right? He's like, my ego has completely like gone away. And I'm like, it's just fun. We're laughing, we're having a good time working about all these things together. And yeah, it's super cool. But that's where, we're coming from. Chefs are incredible at making food taste amazing, and I'm trying to keep the nutritional density and the nutritional kind of efficacy of the food and pair that together. And it's wow, like that's an unstoppable combination.
Well, it's always one of those things, if I was, it's with that daydream, if I was a multi, millionaire, billionaire, I would literally, it's like I said to you, I've got real no interest in food. Like I'm not. I love nice food. I will go to a restaurant and I will, try something amazing and I'm really keen, but just me cooking it. So my dream scenario, if I was loaded, would be that I would talk to my chef and say, I don't really care what you cook me, but can you not give me something that is going to make me put on weight, or do you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
make it nutritional, but like I
Yeah.
don't want tons of food. You've got that. I mean, that's the guest
Yeah.
experience. Like
Well,
I
that's what we
want
want.
really
We
nice
we
food.
want we want that incredible flavor profile, but paired with the macronutrients and micronutrients that contribute to longevity. And that's the conversations that we need to be having, um, and working with chefs. I mean, yeah, they're doing an incredible job, but there needs to be more support.
Yeah, there needs to be more support and just the conversation in it. It shouldn't, I don't think it would be that difficult with their knowledge to start really putting out frameworks to kind of, ultimately
Hmm.
support the crew. It would be a tweak. And I think they might find a bit of peace in it because they would know then. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's like
have
they
having
know
more.
how to do it and how to structure it. So it's not just standing in the galley going, what the hell am I going to cook the crew this
But
week? If you
I
know what I mean.
understand as well, it's difficult because you're also kind of cooking for two different, like the two different genders. So you'll have the guys who are so super active outside and they come in and they can eat more nutrient or calorie dense foods because of the output. They are putting out so much more energy and they need higher intake, which is basically like more nutrient density and calories and that kind of stuff. And you have the girls who kind of want to eat more light and fresh and healthy. So you have that combination of two. And then, the guys will come down to the crew mess and be like, oh, it's quinoa today. Like they'll kind of make fun of something that's a little bit more nutrient, yeah, more
It's also
appropriate for,
nationalities,
yeah,
like what they used to at home. Like chefs do have like it's pretty tough, but I
it's a tough
think
gig.
it's like I said. So at the beginning, after coming back from the Super Yacht Forum in Amsterdam, this conversation is only going to continue. Just like mental health is not going to go away. If your diet, all of these things are interlinked. If your diet and nutrition on board with, crappy food and then not a boat not adhering to hours of rest, couple that with, obviously, bad body image, and then you've got mental health issues. All of these things are kind of interlinked. And I do
Yeah.
feel like we're heading in a direction where one's not isolated from the other. It's kind of got to look, a bit more of a
But that's
holistic.
wellness, right? That is the
Mm,
wellness approach. And that's what I mean by true wellness is getting all these little bubbles and they're all connected. So what is that called? It's not a Venn diagram. It's like a spider graph kind of thing. What's
mm,
that called? I don't know what it's called. But what we need is, yes, these conversations are so important, but then we have to have a strategic plan and we need boots on the ground because it can't, it's not just up to the chief steward, to the captain, or to the chief officer, right? Like they're not, they are professionals in their field, but they're not professionals for wellness and well-being and nutritionists and psychologists and, you know, interior kind of management and coaching and all that kind of stuff. Like they have their profession. That's where the professionals have to come in to implement the strategy that needs to happen for the support that's needed.
yeah. I mean, I do think it's heading in the right direction, but I do think somebody like yourself will need to be at the forefront of these conversations,
Yeah.
And then to be honest, you're talking to individuals like chefs know all of this stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like they know how to create, like you said, amazing food. It is just the final piece in the puzzle to make it nutritious. And also that's another fantastic string, to their bow for the guests. This is not just something that affects the crew members. Obviously, our needs are quite specific, but more and more guests are after now, especially high net worth clients. They want nutrition, they want.
Could you imagine if the yacht chef, maybe for example, they could have like a consultation with a nutritionist during the charter or for the charter or for the guests, for the owners, and having some coaching of how to tailor the food to keep the nutritional integrity of the dish tailored to that person's, wellness and well-being. For example, like if that person has trouble sleeping, okay, let's choose meats that are higher in tryptophan, higher in magnesium, that we have the calming effect. Also, we're using lavender, we have chamomile in there. This kind of like synergistic pairing of food. And it's kind of like it's almost a it's almost like a new kind of trajectory of nutrition for the ultra high net worth, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of the vision that I see that's where nutrition is going on board for yachts. It's like, yeah, it's really
I mean,
it's
yes,
fascinating.
yeah, it's fascinating. It's quite exciting at the same time, but it's just, I mean, we had a documentary in the UK about, they wanted to know about what these high processed foods were doing to children's brains. They didn't experiment on children, but a guy used himself as a guinea pig, and it rerouted the want factors in the brain. So, like, the food that we're eating is laced with stuff to make it non-filling but really addictive, And I think society's coming to, it's a day of reckoning. We're just realizing that we are being manipulated by our food, just like
Yeah.
marketing can manipulate you to want the next, iPhone or whatever. Food is being tampered with, and none of us,
My
we've just kind of
whole
slept.
body gets goosebumps at this conversation because it is. I mean,
It's scary.
that's what food chemistry is. And you have a whole team of food chemists, scientists in labs, in Kellogg's, in Denon, in Unilever, making the food so highly palatable, it becomes addictive, right? And it's not filling, so you always just want to keep having more and more and more. And it's yeah, I mean, that's their full-time job, is to make it as palatable as possible.
It's crazy because there was a book I read, like How to Think Yourself Thin, and there's an exercise in it where you just taste the food, like really try hard to taste like an ultra processed food, and like what taste does it have? Does it have any taste? And you find out that a lot of these high processed foods don't really have any taste, but it's weird because you feel like it tastes incredible. But if you actually concentrate and try to taste the different things that are going on in your mouth, there's nothing there.
I
It's
think
just
for
all
me
like a
it would
weird.
be it's my sugar receptors, and I'm a sweet tooth 100%. And for me it would be the sugar receptors in my mouth, those taste receptors, then send the signals to my brain of pleasure, right? So in that moment, you were just talking about that, and I was kind of thinking of, oh, having like a milk chocolate, right? Because a dark chocolate is a little bit more richer, it has a little bit more density to it, but the milk chocolate gives me a lot more pleasure. And it's that pleasure response in my brain, that dopamine, that seeks out continuously that response from the food. And yeah, it's completely consuming.
It's really scary. Like at the end of the documentary that I watched, the guy had his brain scanned again after going back to his normal diet, and the receptors and stuff hadn't gone back to normal. So
Oh,
once we've
wow.
been contaminated, like once we've done this to ourselves, there's no research yet to say it's actually reversible.
I wonder
Because
how
once
much
you've
time.
created that
Yeah.
want and that addict, these foods, it's actually terrifying. Like it's one of the weird things that's going on in society across the Western world at this moment in time, where you don't want to think that there's a big conspiracy or there's a big bad anything out there, but there is something fundamentally wrong with what has happened to our food.
To the
And
food supply.
yeah,
Yeah.
like literally from the 70s, everything changed. So what the hell
Yeah.
happened? And that was before you even get onto genetics, being genetically disposed to be overweight or rounder or whatever. So it's a never-ending topic.
No, it's fascinating. And that's why I wanted to work in research, because this stuff, it consumes me because I find it so interesting. But then again, also with what I'm doing in regards to repairing people's relationships with food, it's so fascinating to see the journey of, let's say, like my client's journey of everything they've done and what they've gone through their whole lives, okay, to get to where they want to work with me, right? And then we start to work together and we see that transformation. It's fascinating, and to see how they think about food, how they think about themselves and their bodies, and then how we can change that together. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Well, obviously, I've got to wrap it up because we could talk for ages, couldn't we, about these things? I find it really,
I
really
know.
fascinating. We didn't even
It
get
is.
into, the buzzwords, of Zempic and all of that jazz yet, but we
Yeah.
can maybe, because I've actually heard of people
Oh,
taking it on board.
yeah,
Start
I have.
crew.
No, I actually have I have two clients on board taking Ozempic.
See that in my brain, that's the logical counteraction. So you've just ate a whole bunch of food that changes the neurosynapses in your brain to want shit food, and you
So
can't
I'll give
control it.
you,
So what they do is they give you another drug to stop you wanting it.
so let
And I mean, if
me
you
give
wanted to
you a
make
little bit
money,
of,
it's brilliant.
I need to give you a little bit of background to my two clients who are on Ozempic right now. So one of them has been working with me for about a year and a half. She was one of my first ever clients, and she was a huge binge eater. So we were able to eliminate her from binge eating. She became very stable with food, which is fantastic. But she wasn't able to lose the weight. She felt uncomfortable. She did have excess weight that she was carrying, and she wanted to lose it, which I fully support 100%. But everything she was doing, it there was something that wasn't matching up. So we had her go do blood tests, blah blah blah. Her cycle was always, from the beginning. We were talking about her cycle, and it was always out of whack. Only until, we wanted to stabilize her with food first, get her stress hormones regulated and all that kind of stuff, because stress has a huge factor in what's happening hormonally with our menstrual cycles. Turns out she has PCOS and quite severely. So one of the first line responses to PCOS is losing weight. But you have PCOS, you have insulin resistance. It's very difficult for you to then lose weight. So she's on Ozempic to try to reverse her PCOS, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, so it is working. She is losing weight, and basically, she's married. She wants to be able to have children soon, so we need to get her ovulating regularly so she can start to track her cycle. She wants to go this route first because she also wants to lose weight, and I do support that. But the work that we've done together to eliminate her binges, I'm confident that she'll be able to kind of wean herself off and not take Ozempic, or eventually come off of it and know how to eat, because that's a whole conversation with people who are on Ozempic, because it cuts any kind of thoughts around food or impulses around food or any cravings or wants for food. What happens when you come off of Ozempic? Is that gone into hyperdrive? Are you then like, you get these urges to eat that are completely out of control and you don't know what to do or how to deal with that, right? And then another one of my clients, she had metabolic syndrome. So she was carrying a lot of excess fat. That basically becomes its own organ and secreting these hormones that it was so difficult for her to lose weight. So she decided she would like to go on Ozempic, which I supported her decision. And she's gone from a size 14, she's now down to a size 10. So, it's not complete, it's not drastic, but it's reasonable that she's feeling so much more confident within herself. And that's the most important thing.
I think there's going to be tons and tons of research that comes out of this because, like I said, just from the documentary side, the game is rigged against us. If you indulge in these foods and they're changing the chemical makeup of your brain to be addicted,
And
that's
then you
before
have
you
that
get on.
body fat as well. Like, actually, what people don't know is that body fat itself, when you have an excess, especially visceral fat, it becomes like metabolically active in itself. So it's so difficult to lose it.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we've got more to talk about.
Yeah,
We will come back and talk about it even more.
I love this stuff.
Before
It's so interesting.
it's really, really interesting, but like I said, nothing's separate. This is the thing, the food that you consume is changing the chemical makeup of your brain, and then you start getting into hormones. Like, women are complicated creatures, and there's lots of things that are kind of working against us, but knowledge is power. So, this is
Exactly.
why I got you on the podcast, and I will get you on again. We will keep covering it. What I might do is get you and a fertility expert as well to have,
Yeah,
let's have a little bit of
great.
three-way conversation about the importance of nutrition when it comes to hormone regulation and all of those factors.
That would be
Um,
fun.
it would be fun. Let's do it. So finally, to before we go off, right? Can you just talk to a woman on board right now, or not on board? What if name a couple of red flags that maybe they should consider talking to somebody about their relationship with food? If they are, I suppose, obviously binge eating, for instance, what are the other
So
red flags would you say you perhaps need to talk to somebody to kind of get those things under control?
basically, if you have never been happy in your body, if you're kind of always battling with what your body looks like and you've never been happy, and you're kind of, maybe you're doing all the right things but you're not seeing the results that you'd expect to see, those are all red flags. If you don't have your period regularly, that's a huge red flag. If your cycle is not regular, that definitely needs to be looked at by a professional. You can start with a nutritionist or, a PT or someone, but you have to then probably get some blood work done, or definitely get some blood work done. Your hair. Has your hair been falling out recently? Are you noticing like big clumps of hair that's coming out in the shower? That's really important as well. Um, but if someone is binge eating or having like, episodes of massive overeating episodes, they know. They know it's happening, right? And it shouldn't be happening. That's not normal, but it's been something that's been happening probably your whole life. And it's not normal. And there is another way to that, and there's freedom from that. And there's You don't have to live like that, just thinking like, oh, that panic if you go out for dinner thinking you're just going to be massively over consuming and you're going to feel so full and you feel so, guilty and ashamed and food guilt and, oh, I shouldn't have eaten that, and oh, but tomorrow I'll be good tomorrow. I'll just have a salad for lunch tomorrow. Like that's not normal thinking. That's not how you should
Yeah.
be conducting your life and living your life, but that's how a lot of women do, unfortunately.
Thank you very much for coming on again. Like I said, I definitely think it's there's lots of topics that are coming up on the horizon. Like I said, how to help, support chefs and create better working environments when it comes to nutrition on board, because basically that gets the best out of your crew. That could create crew longevity. You can keep
Saves
them for
money for the
longer.
boat.
Yeah, all of these things
Mm.
are linked together, and I feel like that we're getting closer and closer to having conversations with industry individuals to kind of like start piecing this all together. So we will be returning to all of these topics again.
Yeah.
But
So
thank you
much to
very
talk
much.
about. Yeah.
So much to
You're
talk about.
welcome.
So much to talk. But yes, thank you very much, Kat, for coming on again. Absolute pleasure. Ladies, if you have enjoyed this podcast episode, we have a whole bunch of others. If you've really enjoyed listening to Kat, she is amazing. She will, if you've got any problems with how you're feeling about yourself, or the way you're eating and you want to kind of get it under control, please contact her. Obviously, all of the links will be below. She is a fabulous lady. We will be continuing this conversation at a later date, so I shall keep you posted. We do have the community app, and we will be announcing some events, so watch this space for the future. But in the meantime, look after yourselves, and we'll see you next time.